So this engine you see is an International VT365. It was in one of my trucks that had caught fire at my shop. It was a total loss. From the time the fire started until there was nothing left of the truck was less than 15 minutes. It went up that fast. I have peeled off any parts I could salvage so I could use for other things, and they're just there was hardly anything left. But I kept the engine because several things. I wanted to see what the effects the fire had on the engine and what may or may not be salvageable in the engine. It's a VT365, which you're probably more familiar with as a 6-liter in the Ford trucks from 04 to 2007. The long block of these engines is virtually the same. It has some minor differences, but the big differences in the front and rear structures, the timing, the programming, the accessory drive, that kind of stuff, and the bed plate on this one. It has a port for an air compressor oil return. So there's some subtle differences like that, but the long block of it is pretty much the same. So I wanted to take it apart and see what is salvageable, if anything, and what kind of effects the fire had on the engine. Because when it caught fire, the fiberglass hood literally melted so quickly that it kind of made a blanket over top of this engine and smoldered. So it didn't get horribly hot, but it did get water in it, because when the fire department finally did show up, it was smoldering. And they just, they wanted to make sure the fire was out, so they just literally hosed everything down with just a ridiculous amount of water. Rightfully so. They didn't want it to kick back up and start back up, but by that time there was nothing left to burn. So anyways, without further ado, let's get into it and start taking it apart. So I got the valve covers off, and you can see that one right there, that's where the oil fill was. That's why it's a little rusty right there. It was open. We had it covered, but it is what it is. So it got hot enough that the injector harnesses melted, but it didn't get hot down here, and the paint's still on the heads. And this was likely from stuff falling down on it that was on fire. Same thing over here. So what we want to do is take these off. Let's see if we can get we'll get this off of here, and we'll start pulling injectors and getting a look at it and see what is salvageable. Well, this isn't a good sign. That cover to the oil cooler is cracked. It leads me to believe that water got down inside there over the winter and froze and broke that, so that's not a good sign. Looks like it's got a crack right there too. Let's see. We got all 4 injectors out on this side, and you can see it never got hot under here because none of these plastic retainers for the rockers are distorted at all. There's one that's broken. It's just completely broken and missing. It's probably laying in the bottom of the oil pan. I got some crud down in here from taking the injectors out, but it's not a big deal. So now we're going to take the upper rocker box cover off, and then we'll get down to the head bolts. Fall out. It was missing the plastic keeper for the end of it. I'll have to flip the heads over it. Taking these are going to fall off. Look how long that's had water in it. That's diesel fuel right there. That cylinder's pretty well. see any. I'm looking for any spot it was blown. This side looks like. Oh, look at that. One stuck open. How about that? Could have been stuck open because the it was open with the rockers on, and it's got a bunch of rust in there now, so now it won't close. Seems like it wants to close. Yeah, it's closing. It's just the crud. Just the crud buildup. It's funny that it was only on one though. Yeah, it's all crusted up in there. And this thing's been sitting for years. I'd never reuse these without sending them in to have them checked anyways. Make sure they're not cracked. But anyways, I'm looking for any place where you can see this seal around here, where it'd be broken, and you can see a stain coming from a cooling passage here where the coolant runs into here. Adventures say this front rocker was broke, so it's possible this is the one that possibly had coolant in it. Maybe one of the hydrolock or something. Oh well, I'll look it over and see. This is the cover to the EGR cooler, or oil cooler, I mean. Yep, she's cracked right there. So water got in that and cracked it over the winter. Right there.
Oh yeah.
Right here, right there. Look at that. The whole screen's ripped out of it anyways.
Oh wow.
It's supposed to be screen all over that. Wonder where the rest is. More melted aluminum. Take the turbo pedestal off now. So much crud in here. So I better get this cleaned up. Don't go any farther. I'm ready. This is a high pressure oil pump cover. We're gonna be taking it off next. If I can find my socket, I need 8mm.
Water.
What's that tell you? There's water everywhere. It probably got in through here. See that solenoid maybe? So this is the back of the cam. These things are, rear gear trains, so the crank gear drives the cam gear off the back of the engine. You see this SDC fitting here. This is where the tube goes over here into the block to feed the heads for the high pressure side of the injectors, the high pressure oil side. Cam looks all right. It's the only place I can see right there, but anyways, we'll I don't know how far we're gonna go. I guess we're just gonna keep going. I want to see if the bottom end's usable or if it's junk or if there's any salvageable parts here. looking rocker plastic. This side got a little warm because I got melted plastic on the top of this side. I don't think that's from that, but there's a breather on this side, probably let some heat in. You know, another good reason to take this apart is getting all the specialty bolts and clips. Like these are all the Torx head bolts for the oil rail. We got the injector clips. You know, anytime you can have extra bolts for one of these, it's not a bad thing.
Oopsie.
It's better if you don't drop the stuff.
They are a bit slippery.
Slippery little suckers. So the pigtail's no good. Well, I don't know. This one, I don't know if they're fused together or not, but regardless, they're still good internals, maybe tips or what have you. Let's get them all out. I'd never reuse the injectors themselves. I mean, it obviously didn't get too hot because this part of the wire is just fine. Problem is, you've had water in the engine, which could quite possibly gotten down these injectors. Especially since there's water laying on the top of them. Yeah, see the water pouring out of them. But if nothing else, there's more bolts for the hold downs. I mean, some guys don't reuse them at all. I don't know. I don't do enough of these to really comment either way. Alright, now I'll get the rocker box cover off. And one again. Slip the glow plug harness there. Push rods out. We're gonna get something else to lay this stuff on. What's that water? You can see the injector spray pattern on that one. Kind of see it on these ones. So that's a lot of possibly oil and water both. I just want to soak the water up and look at what's going on. Well, I'll bet you this thing is stuck. This much rust is in here. I suppose it doesn't really matter about the head gasket. I mean, it looks like there's no seal there, no seal there. I don't suppose it really matters. The deeper we get in this thing, it's not like I'm finding a bunch of salvageable stuff here. It looks like it's all pretty much JUNK supplier. When you blow a head gasket, it'll push the combustion gases into the coolant, in the coolant passages. and pressurize it, which could be what this is. Might have some here. Looks like right in there maybe. So back in here is where the oil pump is. So we'll take this cover off and see. What kind of condition the oil pump's in. Busted off bolt down here. Alright, so this oil pump's gear drive. If crap gets down in here, it makes big heavy grooves in here. Kind of like that. So when it gets grooves in there, you don't get as much oil pressure as you should. Well, how it works is this gear travels on this gear, but you see how it's notched. So this one turns. As it turns, you can see this is off center. Okay? So the way it happens is it pumps like this. As this turns, it moves this around this way. It's hard to do like this, but it moves it in here and it squishes the oil and forces it and pushes it into the oil passages. So when we take it apart, and there's water in this, but you want to look for any wear, damage, anything on these, which this has had some. It's not severe, but you can see where something at some point has gone through this oil pump. You can see the nicks here. That's not enough to keep it from making oil pressure. Sometimes you'll see wear in here as well, where it's wearing off the metal, and it won't squeeze oil as efficiently. For me, I think for what they cost, I don't think I'd ever reuse an oil pump. I don't know if I'd ever reuse one, even if it was expensive. You can see where the water kind of laid in there. There's a little bit of discoloration there. There's no rust, but you can see there's some pitting where some crap has gone through. So the next thing you do is look in here. You want to see what this back portion looks like as well in this cover. This is part of the front cover of the engine, and you can see that in there? There's some scratches, gouges down inside there. Mm-hmm. So this cover to me is not usable. You know, I won't use this. If I can feel it with my fingernails, it's too much damage to me. We're gonna go ahead and take this off just so it's easier to get the crank off. But it's just a bunch of 10 millimeters all up through here. So here's the end of the camshaft here. Here's the end of the crank. So the next thing we'll do is seal kind of loose there. So I guess the next thing we got to do is lift it back up, and we'll have to start on the bottom side. This portion right here is driven off the crank gear. This is the power steering pump, and this is the fuel pump. This is the flywheel housing here. This is a pull type clutch. You can see how the ears go behind it on the shaft that comes across, and the pedal's out here. So when you're pushing down the pedal, it's pulling this pressure plate instead of pushing it like you might be familiar with others. We'll take this clutch off next, and pressure plate, flywheel, or pressure plate, the disc, and the flywheel will all have to come off to get this rear structure off, and then we can drop the pan and look the crank. So as we take it apart, we're paying attention to what's burned off, what's not. You see how the grease is still on here, and there's still oil and grease on the pressure plate. So there's a good possibility that this pressure plate and the clutch could be reused if it's, you know, not worn out. And as I start taking it apart, you'll see it's starting to separate from the flywheel here. That's a good indication that we got some good spring pressure. I'm gonna be careful because these things got a little bit of weight to them. Nice and smooth. Some rust there, rust there. It's an Eaton clutch. I can see a date on it. Tulsa. I don't see a date. Anyways, you notice the difference in the clutch. Man, don't put that in backwards. Alright, now we can take the flywheel off. That is oil and rust. So, in order to use this flywheel housing on that crank, International used an adapter to bring it out. So we'll take these loose, take the flywheel off. You'll see there's an adapter there, and then there's a smaller bolt pattern for the actual crank adapter.
You need your bolt bucket.
It's got an indexing hole here and here. Of course, have something to get a hold of here. This is going to fall. So you can see the adapter here. We want to make sure that that's not where it's been hot, because I want to make sure it's just grease. If it's somewhere it's been hot, then we have to question this. We have to question if the pressure plate's any good.
Ooh, careful. It's separating at the top. I don't want it to fall on your foot.
It's got a little bit of weight to it.
Yeah, I can tell. And watch, you got that other part right behind you. Don't trip.
Yep, there. Right where I wanted it.
Oh, good.
So here's how the cam comes out. There's your STC fitting V2 I was talking about earlier. Here's the seal surface for the crank. So the next thing we're going to do is get it up higher and we'll get the oil pan off and get the bottom end. So there's what's in the oil pan. There's what's in the oil pickup. I'm just getting ready to take this plate loose. And then we're going to set, after I get this off, we're going to set it down on its end. And then we'll look at the bottom end. Well, at first glance, it doesn't look bad. Alright, let's get it stood on its end. Man, it looks like the bottom end looks pretty good. Nice and clean, not overheated, not rusty. The cylinder walls, I think, it would have to be machined if it's even savable. That looks like buildup on top of the cylinder wall. I don't know. Let me flip it over. Alright, that's better. Now that we're laying flat, we'll go ahead and get all these main cap bolts out of here. And we'll lift this cradle, this section here, it's split. It's halves. We'll lift that whole entire section off. We'll look at the main bearings, see what they look like, and then we'll start pulling some rod caps off and see what they all look like. It's pretty promising so far. See the piston cooler nozzles right there for each piston. Gotta be careful with them, you don't break them. I guess in this situation doesn't matter, but if you're rebuilding yours, you probably want to be very careful. If you can feel it, it's unacceptable. So this has had some type of something run through the oil pump and through these bearings, which is going to lead me to believe, after seeing the, you can see the thin spot right there. See the wear on all these. And more than likely, we're going to take these connecting rods apart, take the caps off, and we'll probably find more of stuff like this. More of the same. You can see the deposits on here and the discoloration like it was starving for oil. Just to mention, these are what are called fractured rods. If you notice, the end of that is not machined. These are made and they are basically broken too, put back together, and then the center bored to the perfect machine finish that they need. And I took that 6.7 apart a while ago and it didn't have any locking tabs, but you can see here, this side of a 2007 truck, and they were still using locking tabs for the bearings, which people argue that those are not necessary, and maybe they're not. Maybe you think the squeeze of the connecting rod is enough to keep it from moving, but obviously it doesn't, because that 6.7 spun every single one of them. And these ones did not, and they were starved for oil, or at least low on oil pressure. Alright, I'm going to push this one out. I have to go one by one and get the ones I can, because these two cylinders back here I think are going to be stuck. So I'm trying to get all these out to make it easier to turn that with less friction from these. Crank out, got some standing water stains there. Some minor scratches everywhere else. These are the two I believe are stuck. At least I think. Can't remember which ones, and I got it upside down, I don't know. But we're gonna push them all out. Got them laid out so I can put them back where they belong. Probably ought to just put them back now. so don't get them confused. Cam doesn't look so bad. Be interested to see how they look, how it looks when you pull it out. More standing water. Yeah. You see the wear on the edge there. Same thing there. This one's a thrust bearing. You see the wear on the sides here. There's a spot on the crank right here. I think it's the one. That one. Let's see. There's our front. There's our, yeah, this would be our thrust bearing here. It's machined to ride on that and keep that crankshaft from moving too far forward and back. You just see the wear and the debris that's gone through here. So the way it works is the oil pump creates oil pressure, and it's fed. This is the high pressure oil. Now the low pressure oil was on the front of the engine. Am I going this backwards? Yeah, backwards. No, that's right. So the low pressure oil pump is on the front. It pumps pressure into the block, and there's basically a passage all the way through the block around that hits each one of these. So what happens, the oil pressure comes into each one of the main bearings and pressurizes that, and also at the same time puts oil into the crank to come out at the rod bearings. So you're putting oil in there, and as it goes around, it's feeding oil into this passage, which ends up at these two. This one to these, this to these, this to this one. So that's how your bearings get oil. And contrary to some people's belief, your crankshaft and your rod bearings, your crank and your rods are supposed to, that oil basically suspends it so it doesn't touch this. So once you start to get debris or wear in here, then the gap is too big between here, the tolerance is too large, and then the crankshaft no longer can stay suspended. And when it doesn't, that's when you start getting noises and lower oil pressure, because it's built for that tolerance and that gap. So when the gap gets too big, it's like having a garden hose that has a bunch of holes in it, and by the time the water gets into the garden hose, you really don't have enough to do what you want to do. This is the same philosophy. So if you have excessive gap here in the mains, then you're losing more oil pressure and volume, and you're not getting as much into the crank to hit the rod bearings. And if the rod bearings are worn, it's not the main bearings, then they won't stay suspended as well. And then the camshaft gets splash oil, return oil. So there's also passages you go to the top. They go up, and in the lifter get filled full of oil through a passage, and when the push rod pushes in the lifter, it shoves oil up the center, which lubricates the rocker arms. And then that returning oil comes down and splashes on the camshaft, as well as coming out of the lifter itself every time it's pushed. So now let's get these pistons pushed out of here. We have all the pistons out, and the cylinder walls on majority of them look salvageable, except this one. What I was really kind of looking for was the cam, and I was very hopeful on what I was seeing, but the farther I got back, the worse it got. And this was what I was seeing hopeful about, was it looked pretty decent until you roll it over the rest of the way, and then you see this. It might just be a stain. I don't feel You know, I'm going to take some PB Blaster to that and see if that's just a stain. It looks like it's pitted, but I don't think it is. Yeah, let me clean on that, because these look the same way. They look pitted, but I think it's just a stain, because look, that's coming right off. Huh. Yeah, look at that, it's coming off. So what looks like deep pitting, might get lucky. Might just be rust stains and water dripping through. Huh. Well, I don't feel nothing. Yeah, let me get some blaster on this. Well, I have cleaned it up. I think I could do a little bit more. You see this stain right here? I haven't got that off yet. And still some more staining right there. All I've been doing was just take a blue towel and some blaster, and it's been coming off. This one's the same. It's funny, I'll take all this time to do this, and I'll probably never put this camshaft in another engine, because I'll probably just, if I need one, I'll just put a different engine in, or buy a new cam or a reground cam. I seriously doubt I'll ever use this, but if nothing else, it was interesting just to tear down, I guess. Make a video for tear down. But you can see the piston cooler nozzles. These are oil. They're fed with oil, and they spray oil on the bottom of the piston to cool it down. So it's constantly spraying, and also that spray gets on the cylinder walls and helps with wear. See, that's rust on that cylinder's coming off, but that one had some pretty good pitting. I don't know, it's on top of the surface. I don't know what it'd look like once you tried to clean it up, but yeah, we're not going to use it. But anyways, if I was going to take that cam out, next thing I'd do would be I pushed all the roller rockers, or all the roller lifters, I pushed them down so that the cam can turn freely without touching them. So if I was going to take this out, I'd take out this bolt here and this bolt here. Yeah, let me show you. I'd take out this bolt here, this bolt here, and then I would pull this and guide it through all the way, because these lobes on the cam are going to want to hit and get caught everywhere. So I would take that out. So we're going to take if we take the roller lifters out, they should go back in orientation with the cam. So if you go to reuse it, they're supposed to go back where they were. So these roller lifters, it's important to have these, because these keep the orientation of the lifter. So if you see how that works, that needs to roll with the cam, just like so. So it has to roll up on the lobe of the cam. If this wasn't here, see how this goes in there, this holds it in the right orientation. Otherwise, if this wasn't here and this turned like this, it would just grind the lobe off the cam. it's very common for these needle bearings inside these rollers to fail and destroy an engine pretty quickly. We don't need to take these out. It's really not necessary. Just thought I would, just to show you how they come out. Put them back where they go, and then we'll inspect them. See how they look. I mean, really, where we're at in this teardown is just informational purposes, I guess. Dirt, yep, dirt. So you can see how those all sit in that holder like that. So when they're orientated up against the cam lobe can come up just like this and push this one up and down. That's it. Put this towards the back so we know which way's the back. That's holding the retainer for this one. Stand it up and down. Just go ahead and grab these one by one. Okay, and just same thing on the other side. I gotta tell you, them cylinder holes aren't nearly as bad as I thought they would be. You have to understand that the fire department put this, well, the fire was out by the time they got there, but they hosed this thing down pretty harsh with water. Alright, well, there you have it. It's a full teardown of a 6-liter VT365 V8 diesel from International. You know, same thing. The base long block is the same in the pickups as it is in the medium duties, but the structure on the rear is different. The front cover is different. There's some programming issues that are different as well, but regardless, I just about halfway through realized there really probably isn't any parts in here I'm actually going to use, but at that point you just need to follow through and go ahead and tear it down, because you never know, somebody might find this and needing to do some work to theirs and afraid to tear it apart, don't know what they're gonna find, or if they need specialty tools or any of that stuff. And you know, you can see we used a couple impacts, some metric sockets. About the most special tool we had was a couple Torx bits. That was it. Everything else came apart pretty simple. But anyways, maybe it'll help somebody who's a little leery about taking one apart, because these are a pretty simple engine. Not a lot to screw up here if you're taking it apart or doing it yourself. We'll probably gather up the parts we're going to keep. These are all scrap over here except for the bed plate. We'll probably stick that on a skid, stick it in the back of the building, trip over it for, 3-4 years, and then dump it in a dump truck and send it to scrap, because that's probably what will happen to it, right? Yeah. If not before then. Them injectors, I think I might be able to get that connector and repin them, and then have a good set of spare injectors, because all those injectors did work in the truck. That truck originally had a head gasket issue, was why I was looking at the head gasket so closely. It wasn't an injector problem, it was a head gasket problem. So, anyways, hope you enjoyed. Now we get the monumental task of cleaning this crap up. Yeah. Anyways, thanks for watching. Catch you on the next one.